Hello again for another roundup of, Will's weekly football roundup. So sorry it wasn't out on Thursday, so we're going to do it today because it's one I've decided to try and put a lot more research in. I'm going to try and sort of get a bit more hard-hitting sort of facts going into this, maybe a little bit of journalism. Not really an expert on it, so we'll see how well I do the research. So if I get any of my facts wrong, I'm going to apologise in advance. There we have it. So, cool. After some of the recent signings that have taken place over the week, over this coming week, I've decided to look at arguably two of the worst run football clubs, at least in my opinion, and sort of what's good, how have they got to that state, what's bad, where's the silver lining in it all. Okay, so the two teams I'm going to look at are going to be Chelsea and Barcelona. So I'm going to have a look at Barcelona first, as I believe they've had longer standing issues, and then look into Chelsea, who I think have got potentially less severe issues. However, I'd say aren't quite as obviously deep in it as Barcelona. However, are looking like they're just about to fall off the cliff, as it were, as a club run. Cool. So let's have a quick look into Barcelona. Obviously, one of the biggest teams in Spain, sort of along with Real Madrid. Their current debt as a football team is around 3 billion euros. Just think about billion for a second. This has been done through poor management in the boardroom with people like Fran Laporta, as well as loss of income through things like sort of COVID, which has hit many teams sort of very hard throughout Europe. However, obviously seemed to hit them a fair bit harder because of the need for attendance. As well as this, they sort of had what is considered an overblown wage bill, which unfortunately, several of their players, when they won the Champions League back in 2015, had several big bonuses, triggers and contracts to up everything. This is a similar thing to Portsmouth when they won the FA Cup, but this is going to be this is on such a bigger scale than that. Obviously, it got Portsmouth eventually relegated, who were trying to start climbing the EFL again. Barcelona, it's huge. So you can have a look at some of the mismanagement of the funds in an effort to sort of maintain pace with Real Madrid. They brought in several signings over £100 million. And the fact that there's more than one is really worrying. And I'm going to run through that list, and you're going to honestly think, I don't think any of them landed. I don't think any of them, some of them had moderate success at best. Nothing more than that. Sort of trying to find the next superstar, the next Messi, or someone to play alongside him. So the three big signings that they've done during this time, they had Philippe Coutinho for £142 million, money of which most of that hasn't actually gone fully over to Liverpool yet, and that was a deal done over 6 years ago. You had Ousmane Dembele, who has obviously, since all of these players have since left the club, for over 105, with about 40 million plus on add-ons. And Antoine Griezmann for 120 million, weakening a rival in Atletico, however, then loaning him back to Atletico and then selling him back to them for 40 million with a considerable loss, with the club in itself having had several transfers over 50 million for what you could argue were potentially only squad players at best, or haven't sort of upped the sort of quality of the first 11. These can include people like Pjanic, who's obviously since left, and Ferran Torres and Rafinha, who can be good players, however aren't barely used more than sort of squad options at the moment, and are always the first team players that are linked with going out the door. Let's sort of all focus on anything coming out of La Masia, as it were. Now, all of these signings throughout the years, they've never one of the reasons they've never fit is that there have been so many different managerial appointments. And okay, get it. Many teams have different managerial appointments. However, when you're changing over a manager, you need to be aware of that manager's style of play. You can't sort of go someone that's sort of looking to control possession to someone that's preferring to sort of play on the counter-attack, as it were. So you had very different styles from that, from people like Valverde to Ronald Koeman to Xavi. Is people actually need to have a look and realise it's not all going to be all the same brand tiki-taka as there was once with Pep. They're very different styles of play. Some of them are trying to do the best with sort of the players they have. Some of them have got their own very strong beliefs and wanting to stand by their beliefs and their structures and these players to get their results, as it were. Now, the club in itself has pulled what you consider what are called financial levers. Now, this is really worrying for Barcelona, as one of the main things within the La Liga setup is that the TV rights deals within the Liga is that I believe 50 to 60% of everything in total goes towards Real Madrid and Barcelona. There is a bias towards those two teams as football club. They get the biggest clubs, they get the biggest finances. Therefore, it's nigh impossible to compete with them on a strong financial level or to ever get close to it. Therefore, it's a league which you've got to do something amazing to win the league if you're not one of those two teams. So this is where you give teams like Atletico so much credit, because they don't have that support, they don't have that backing in the same way that those teams do. Now, one of the financial levers, as the expression is, for Barcelona is sort of selling some of those rights in advance in order to sort of cover the financial costs, as it were. So this means that they don't have as much profit in later seasons. So they're gambling everything on the current time and the current situation, and potentially going to suffer further down the line within their own future, which is really worrying, and I'm very short-sighted from the owner in itself, as far as I'm concerned. As well as that, in order to get fans and everyone excited, they continue to flout money everywhere, big money signings like they've attempted to do with Dani Olmo. Now, Dani Olmo was a player that they couldn't actually sign because they had so many registered players, they couldn't afford to sign him. This is one of the main articles which brought me about doing this video as a whole, is that they basically had to get rid of Gundogan, a player that didn't want to be at Man City anymore. They had to beg, just like begging their older brother Pep Guardiola to come and save them, to take this player off of them. Don't get me wrong, it's a good deal for Manchester City. He's a clutch player, he brings experience. But it's a sign of how sort of weak Barcelona are at this moment in time. It's a bit pathetic, really. This is supposed to be one of the biggest teams in the world. They're continuously sort of struggling, and mismanagement is they're going to potentially run out of these levers. Then what are they going to do? Every season everyone says they need to sell, and they do. They need to get some of those wages off the books. They need to generate money. How they do that is they're going to have to end up to stop doing these big, expensive signings. Oh, Dani Olmo, he had a very good Euro. Yes, he did. He's a good player. Did we need to bring him back? Let's have a look at that midfield. No, we didn't. Let's have a look at players and positions that would benefit and strengthen the first 11. That, as a player, is a quality player, but he does not improve that team enough in order to blow your finances more out of the water. Now, the one silver lining, and it is the only silver lining I've got for Barcelona currently, is La Masia. Now, La Masia, to sort of other people unaware, is essentially their youth academy. This is their ability to bring through players. Now, this is originally what made Barcelona so strong in the late noughties, early 2010s, as it were, when you had brought through people like Xavi and Busquets and Iniesta and Pedro and all these players. That's what made them strong. It wasn't blowing the cash out on all these big money signings. It was producing that quality and that talent. That's what endeared many fans to them in the first place. They need to just go hard on La Masia and hope and pray that they've got more quality players coming through that team. And they've already got so many brilliant players that have come through that team over the last couple of years, which have very much saved their bacon as far as I'm concerned. People like Lamine Yamal, people like Pedri, people like Gavi, potentially people like Kubarassi. This is a team which needs to play into that. You need to just stop buying players, sell some assets, dig into La Masia, hope and pray you've got some ability, and just suck it up that Real Madrid, having just bought Kylian Mbappe, having had Jude Bellingham, having been better managed for several years, are just going to have to be better than you. You have to look at this as a project. Let's not look at instant success now. That's so... I don't even know what to say. I've never seen a club potentially more mismanaged. So from that, I'm going to go to the next team, which is going to rival that, as it were. That's Chelsea. So Chelsea are a bit of one of the biggest teams in the Premier League, having been under the Roman Abramovich era, having potentially fired and sacked managers in order to ensure success, having had a strong spine throughout that team for years, which ensured success. The Petr Cech, John Terry, Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba spine, as it were. Managers constantly changed. They always had that to rely on. They don't really have that anymore. They are a team very much in flux, in change. So, Todd Boehly, having attempted to buy the club in 2019, obviously succeeded in 2022 due to the potential involvement of Roman Abramovich within Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So Todd Boehly has seen an opportunity and taken it. Now, he himself originally believed in a very active role within the club, a long-term project, which is good, and that's brilliant. And then, granted, Chelsea hadn't obviously been like that for a while, but that's good. And he comes from a strong background from sports club owning around Strasbourg in Ligue 1, the LA Dodgers, LA Lakers, obviously different sports within America. So having sort of obviously been based in America, he's tried to bring over some of those ideals into the league as a whole, from potential suggestions of scrapping relegation, as that's not a common thing in many American sports, to North versus South teams, to playing 4-4-3. Obviously, maybe it's just a bit of a blunder in his ability to count. So, very sort of strained ideas. Now, one of these issues with this is how sort of players are bought and moved around through baseball is sort of a bit more limited. He wants to essentially buy footballers that haven't reached their peak, as it were, that young footballers that have got great potential like great sort of resale value, hoping that one of them you get them always half good, couple of seasons, they're going to bang, they're going to be world class, they're going to be up there. So these high potential players. Now, unfortunately, the whole point of buying these less of players with potential, not actual guaranteed success, is the idea that you're going to pay less money for them, with the idea of potentially selling them on for more money later down the line when they are a big success. He's definitely, for most of his players that have been bought, these are players at the tip top of the price range. You're not getting more money for people like Enzo Fernandez, for Mykhailo Mudryk, for Moises Caicedo, for even Wesley Fofana or Marc Cucurella. These are players that they've spent the utmost limits on, paying over 100 million for Enzo Fernandez, 100 for Caicedo, 70 plus for Mudryk, who had sort of a season or so within Ukraine. Wesley Fofana, who's young but injury prone. Cucurella, who they've simply bought because Manchester City were linked, and well, if another team's got linked with them, they must be good for us. That's not true. That's not true in the slightest. As mentioned previously, if he went to Man City, he could well have been a success because Manchester City have thought and profiled the players that they want to bring in. Chelsea haven't. They are throwing money at it, hoping something sticks, hoping something saves them. So continuously changing between managers on top of this as well, from Thomas Tuchel, who had won the Champions League in the previous season after he bought out the club, changing to Graham Potter, to Frank Lampard, to Pochettino, who started to look like he was getting everything together and under sort of a plan, to Enzo Maresca. This is haphazard and this is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. That club has had roughly 39 transfers in 2 years. That's sort of accumulating to over £1.15 billion. That's a lot. And how many of them are genuinely considered successes? These, well, you could argue Cole Palmer, who wasn't originally a first choice. And then you say some of them are sort of, Nicholas Jackson, you say sort of average, okay-ish. It's nothing more than that. Malo Gusto potentially is the right back. It's so worrying. And on top of that is you've got these sort of 40 to 50 plus players now on long-term contracts from like 6 to 7 years, some of which, like Cole Palmer, has upped his contract to 9+ years, is ridiculous. Now, part of the reason they have these long contracts is partly to negate transfer fees over several seasons. You're paying out less. Now, the other thing is that means you keep them on a low contract for a long period of time. And then if they do bang and they do get successful and they ask for more money, you'll say, well, you've got another 4 years on here, so tough. You don't then decide to reward a player who's still got another 5 years on his contract, regardless of how well Cole Palmer has played. You're going against the very method and strategy that you yourself were trying to impose. And therefore, on top of that, to balance the books, you are then gutting the club by having to sell players on top of bringing in the players. And this isn't selling any average. This is selling academy players that love the club, players adored by the fans, that the fans can get behind. Every football fan loves it when one of their academy players breaks into a team. That academy, everyone going through there now is thinking, I'm not going to play for Chelsea. This is irrelevant. I'm just being used to save money, to help balance the books for Chelsea Football Club. I'm not going to play for the team that I love, that I want to play for. And it's absolutely ridiculous. So you can ostracise some players just because they're homegrown. So, for example, the Conor Gallagher situation, he is never a player that wanted to leave Chelsea Football Club. He loved that club. Unfortunately, he then ended up getting shifted away from the first team to train with the reserves. He had said nothing wrong to anyone or anything. He acted a consummate professional and until the very end, before his move to Atletico finally came about. Now, unfortunately, the club as a whole right now has still got 40 plus players. Now, unless they dramatically sell 5 to 10 of those players before the transfer window shuts, there's going to be all sorts of hell breaking loose at Cobham on the basis that there's not going to be enough space for training the player. The manager's not going to see them. Some of them, you're going to end up annoying and upsetting players, as mentioned by the Raheem Sterling comments previously last week. And it's going to bring down morale, and it's an absolute nightmare. And to that extent, I do sort of feel sorry for the manager, because he's got someone above him who's just running around sort of not knowing a clue, thinking his ideas are revolutionary. They're not. Believe me, there's been people that have been in the football business for a lot longer. If it's a system that they believed worked, they would have tried it. This isn't revolutionary. People don't do this because it's stupid. Simple as that. You're not, with so many players on the books on top of that as well, you're hoping that one of these potential players bangs. Okay, they might not. You're not going to necessarily sort of sell the player on if they do. And any players that aren't playing within that team that they bought for 30, 40 million, if they're not playing, they depreciate in value. lose sort of fitness. Those players could be happy to eat up their money, and well, that's their decision at the end of the day whether they want to play football or not. But it's very, very poor management there from sort of the top dog, as it were. You're not getting the value for money there. You're going to lose money, and you're going to be stuck when you're trying to shift and sell further players, because they'll still have 5-6 years left on their contracts. There's sort of such unjoined up thinking to that football club, and they're just steering down, just hanging over a cliff, ready to fall. Not quite potentially to the same level as Barcelona, but they are so close to it, and it's such a worrying time for them right now. I mean, as we speak, they're currently trying to shift Romelu Lukaku, which is good. They tried to shift Armando Broja to Ipswich. However, that deal itself didn't go through due to a failed medical. And you're just hoping they can shift more and more players. But, it's against the time, your time constraint, and other teams know that as well. So you are going to get pushed for money if you really need them out the door. They're going to have to go for pennies, and all the other clubs know that. So, what do you think of Barcelona and Chelsea? Are there any other football teams you'd like me to do a deeper look into, sort of how well they run as a club, how well they don't potentially run as a club? Let us know. I always sort of encourage feedback and always look forward to any potential feedback I get from anyone. It's very appreciated. I'll see you all on Monday. Goodbye.